Hey everybody, my name is Alex Merced from alexmerced.com, and what I want to talk about today is about socialism and communism and why they cannot exist without free markets, even though free markets can exist without socialism and communism. So let me define my terms. When I say communism, what I mean is the basically common ownership of the means of production. So it just means that instead of a company being owned by one person, it would be owned by the community in a sense. So the community makes decisions as far as how many of this to make, whether we expand the business, etc., and then shares in the profits. That's essentially the basic fundamental concept behind that word communism as I understand it. When I say socialism, I'm talking about taking risks, such as, the risk of crashing your car, or the risk of being sick, or the risk of dying, and taking the costs of those risks, and instead of just you having that cost, spreading that cost across several people, socializing it, in order theoretically to have the average cost minimized to every, on average. In a sense. So those are the two ideas. That is communism and socialism. Okay, and when I say free markets, I mean a market where basically you own yourself, you own your body, you own your property, and how you exchange your property, how you organize an enterprise is totally up to you. What you pay for something, what you charge for something is up to you. People are free to create arrangements between each other freely without some sort of third party using someone else's property without their consent to put their finger on the scale. Okay, so we see that now through taxes and subsidies, where a third party is using other people's property to put their finger on the scale of who wins or loses in that market environment. Now there's the idea of socialism, communism, and there are people, socialists and communists, who want to run all of society and force all of society to organize along that principle. So people who want a communist society essentially want nothing to be owned by anyone in particular, but everything to be owned by everyone, and that everyone gets involved in the decision making for everything. Okay, so essentially there would be no more prices per se, because there's no need for you to go to a store to go buy a spoon. We will, as a community, decide how many spoons are needed and how we should distribute those spoons. That way, everyone has a fair distribution of spoons. And people who want socialism, socialists, what they want is to have government act as essentially, as Krugman likes to put it, as an insurance company with an army. So basically saying certain risks such as healthcare, the cost of retirement, these types of costs, and instead of saying, okay, you're responsible for figuring out how this is paid for, we're just going to pay for it for everybody, and everyone's going to pay into a pool through your taxes to manage that sort of insurance policy. So there's no competitive market for insurance. There's no you comparing different insurance companies. You just have a blanket set policy that's determined by government, that's paid for by whatever taxes are required that you're told to pay. Okay, so that's essentially sort of the socialist and communist society as I am explaining it in this video. Again, you'll talk to people who have different views on it, but that's what I mean when I talk about it in this video. Problem is, the reason why communism and socialism oftentimes run into a lot of problems is for two reasons, okay? And this was a big thing in the whole communist debate when you had like Mises, Hayek, Rothbard debating a lot of other communist economists in a sense. I use that term loosely. Now, first problem was the incentive problem. The problem is like, basically, if I work harder but I don't get more, then why work harder if I'm going to get the same if I don't work hard? So the incentive for people to be more productive isn't there. And the problem is that lost productivity means there's less stuff, because again, productivity means producing things. So we're producing less stuff, which means everybody has less. And then the second problem is the calculation debate. Well, if we don't have a price of what a spoon costs, because there is no prices, because we all centrally decide we're going to use these materials for X, the problem is steel is used for all sorts of things. Cars, building houses, etc. So how much steel should I allocate to building a house versus allocate towards building cars versus allocate to building silverware or whatever else you build with steel, a train track? You can't do it as well, because in a market environment, the price of the steel and what you can charge for the project. So what I can charge for a train ticket, what can I charge for a car, helps me determine whether it's a worthwhile use of that steel versus some other use of that steel. Okay, in this way, there's actually enough cars for people who want them. There is enough train tracks for people who want to ride the train. Okay, what happens when you don't have that? You may make too many cars and not enough train, or too much train and not enough cars, because you have no feedback mechanism to determine what it is that people generally want. You have people in a room kind of theoretically thinking what they may want, but what they need you don't know, and then you find out it's too late. You might overplant this crop, underplant this crop, this weather doesn't work out right, and you have a famine. This is kind of what happened under the communist regime of Mao. People starved because they just couldn't allocate resources right, and they just didn't have enough food for everyone. While, basically in a market environment, typically you can have less people actually making sure there's a food supply and feed more people, because you have all the incentives that create knowledge and prices that create knowledge for people to make those decisions. So you can't really run a society successfully purely via a socialist or communist method, because the incentive problem and the pricing problem. You're destroying prices, you destroy knowledge. Prices help allocate resources. They communicate information. But socialism on a smaller scale and communism on a smaller scale can work because you have a market providing prices to inform them, and people are choosing to be part of it. So, for example, think of a kibbutz. That's essentially a small socialist communist community, but you choose to be part of the kibbutz. Okay, so in that case, you have an incentive to be productive because you don't want to get kicked out. Two, the kibbutz still has to buy its resources external from the kibbutz, so this price is helping it make decisions on how it allocates its resources on that external market. An insurance company is a socialist mechanism. Essentially, you are with a bunch of other people mixing your risk, but you choose whether to buy that insurance policy. And there are competitors, and you can kind of decide how you allocate your resources based on the price of the insurance policy, and the insurance company can choose how to allocate their resources because of prices. But it's essentially, it's a socialist mechanism. You're socializing risks. A worker-owned co-op is essentially a communist enterprise, in a sense where the means of production are owned by everybody who works at that enterprise, and they make decisions communally. That's fine, but again, you have prices external to that, and participation is voluntary, and everyone wants the project to succeed, or they wouldn't be participating. So everyone has a vested interest in making better decisions. When you just say, hey, everybody gets to be in on the decision making, and there's no prices, there's not as much incentive for good deliberation. So that's why communism and socialism can exist in small scope within a free market, but not the other way around. Like, socialism and communism can't run society on their own. They don't. My name is Alex Merced from alexmerced.com. Have a great day and enjoy.